Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. We got the swirling thing of death. There we go. There we go. Welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How you doing?
Very well, Brian. How are you?
Good. We just had the little circle of death going around and around and around as we waited for this thing to launch. But it's up and running. It's good.
That's why we're laughing. Technical issues. You know that thing? You're like, is it going to happen?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So you doing good?
I'm doing well. There was apparently a big earthquake in Northern California, but it was way far north of me. It was a 7 up in a few miles off the coast up in north. So, and everyone's like, my brother from DC, from where you are, was like, "Do you guys feel it?" It's like, no. So, anyway,
I was wondering that myself.
It's a very lightly populated area of the state, but there was a tsunami warning, which is, that's a little scary for anybody on the West Coast.
See, we get tsunami warnings in Hawaii when the West Coast gets an earth. It does have that effect that it travels, and then all the tsunami warnings go. Yeah,
it propagates in both directions.
So Japan, Alaska, the West Coast, anytime those three get an earthquake of any significant size, it's like, oh, okay. Tomorrow, there may be,
keep a lookout. 6 o'clock, we might get a big one.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing is Hawaii's far enough from everything that you at least have some warning. And this was like not very far off the coast, and it was a pretty big earthquake, and it was close to the surface. So in those cases, they're always more concerned about a tsunami.
Yeah.
But apparently, then it got called off pretty quickly because it turned out not to be anything. So that's good.
That's good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we have had a great couple of weeks talking about low back pain.
Yep.
So we're going to continue that today. We're going to get into what should you do with a client when they walk through your door, how to look at assessing them, what are your first steps and things of that nature. You can even do this, if you're not in the fitness world, you can do it with your family or friends or whatnot. It's good always to train your eye a little bit and to help them out. If you can see some general things and be like, oh, well, I'm noticing this, or maybe it hurts when you do this. So we're going to talk through all of that today. But before we get to that, I wanted to remind you, please hit the like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it on the platform of your choice. Also check us out at Moving Convos on at gmail.com. Moving Convos on Instagram is also how you can spot all of our anatomies, all of our video versions, all of that kind of stuff. A lot of fun that you and I have filming those. Also, I want to let everybody know, mark this on your calendar, guys. If you're interested, on February 15th and 16th, I'm going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, putting on a rehab summit. Okay, if you guys are interested, I'm going to put more information into the bio here, and you'll see it on Instagram at Moving Convos or under mine, as well as on my Facebook page under Brian Ritchie. It's going to be a rehab summit. We're going to be covering all aspects of not only spinal issues, we're going to cover shoulders, hips, knees, the whole shebang, what you should do with your clients, how you should keep them safe and whatnot. So it's 2 days. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And it's going to be in Scottsdale. So in February, Scottsdale's kind of a cool place to go. I got to say, it's not the worst place in the world to go.
Love it. That's great, Brian. Super exciting. And guys, you may have fun with us either on YouTube or in the podcast, but live, Brian is full of like amazing props and just super, super practical information and it allows you to like see him live and ask questions and really get into it. I've seen Brian teach a billion times. That's why we teach together. And it's always a fantastic experience. So, and
it's fun.
Send yourself off to Scottsdale.
Everybody.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'll let you guys know more about that as it comes up. But let's get into low back pain. Also, check out my book, Back Exercise, Stabilize, Mobilize, Reduce Pain. It's on Amazon. It's cheaper there than what I can sell it for. So go there if you guys are interested. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is there. And I don't push my book very much in this podcast, but since we're covering the low back, thought I'd mention it again. It's a great stocking stuffer. So it's that time of year. So
it's also a really good resource, because what we're going to start talking about now is strategies, is assessment, and then strategies. And a lot of times you'll get like the first step in working with low back pain, which is probably what we'll cover more or less today in terms of practical stuff.
Yeah.
But you have to go beyond the first step. Like the first step is the first step, and it's an important one. But you've got to also be able to take that client. Let's say there's low back pain, you're working with a pitcher, right? Or you're working with a soccer player, or you're working with a gymnast. You've got to be able to take them from those first steps up to full function, ideally. And again, even if it's just like a mom who's got 2 little kids, like she's got to be able to lift that kid up, pick him up, put him in the car seat, put him in the back of the SUV. These are real functional needs that people have. And you've got to, set the foundation, which we'll do today, but you've also got to figure out how to build them up to really get to where they need to go.
And that's the key that I find is missing in so much of, even in physical therapy. They used to be able to spend a lot more time, but now with the insurance industry and things, people don't spend as much time in physical therapy. So they don't get the progressions all the time.
No.
Sometimes they do, but they don't always. So a lot of times it's our job to really help them progress and take it to that next level. Because you can learn the basics, but if that's all you're doing are the basics over and over and over again, well, you become efficient at that, but you don't ever get up off the ground or off the table or never to that next step. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So it's up to us to do that.
Piece. It is, because oftentimes that's our role. We're post rehab, right? A lot of times I've graduated from physical therapy and I'm 50% better, but I'm trying to get to 100 and I'm not there yet. Like that happens all the time, in my practice. Like so many clients are like, I've done physical therapy. I've done, this, or I had a surgery and I've done everything I'm supposed to do, but I'm still not where I want to be. I still can't play golf. I can't play tennis, whatever it is that they want to do. So often that is our role, is to bridge that gap from the basics to full level, full daily life function or full athletic function.
Yep. And that's one thing that I made sure I did in the book was I gave 6 months worth of progressions. So you have, first month, second month, third month, fourth month, all the way through, because that gives you that opportunity to really work on those progressions. So that's kind of one of the things that we did, and broke it down to all the different types of, conditions that we're dealing with. So we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to talk about what to do when a client comes in to see you. We're going to take a break for just a second, and we'll be right back. And we are back. A little technical difficulty, guys. For some reason, the technical gremlins seem to be jumping up and down a little bit on us today, but we're back. So let's dive right in. Let's dive into low back assessment. What do we do when a client comes to us? How do we be, what do we do?
So one of the things we've said a bunch of times, and I just want to reiterate this because this is often where I start, is understanding from them what makes them feel better, what makes them feel worse.
Yes.
So that always, again, we've talked about how this is like the first clue in our low back detective series, right? This is the first clue we're going to look at. So are they better, are they better in the morning? Are they worse in the morning and better after they've moved? Like that's going to tell me typically that there's something like arthritis going on. Or that they're better with movement, they're worse when they're cold or not moving. Are they better sitting? Are they better standing? And that's that right there is like a
huge
key thing, right? Because if they're better standing, it generally means they prefer either a neutral towards extension position. And if they're better seated, they generally means they prefer a slightly flexed position. So that right there gives me a really clear clue of where to start in terms of finding their dynamic lumbo-pelvic position that's going to be most beneficial for them.
Yeah, that's probably the questions that I immediately ask are what makes it feel better, what makes it feel worse, and how are you throughout the day? Because that also tells me where they are, endurance wise or tissue tolerance wise. And I say that because what you're going to hear a lot from people is, I'm at work, I'm sitting down, I'm not, moving as much. And then by 2:00, my back is killing me. And I'll jot that down when I do their medical history, I'll jot down 2 p.m. or 1 p.m. or whatever it is, because as they get stronger, My goal is for that number to keep increasing so that all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, I don't notice until 4 o'clock now, or I make it through the whole day without much discomfort or without much pain. I only notice it when I'm leaving for the day or whatever. So that tells me, okay, the strength is building and it's working. That's the
Right.
key, that it's working, because they're gaining strength, they're gaining stability, they're gaining that endurance for those muscle fibers throughout the day.
We got some success. You're succeeding, right? What you're trying to do is actually working, and that's something you're always looking for. Are what you're doing is what you're doing working?
Yep.
And you don't always know that. And a lot of people I know kind of have a vision in their head and they just think if they just do it, it'll work. But you've got to keep feeding back with that client are we actually getting somewhere? And if you're not, you got to reorient, like redirect. Where are we going to go next?
And that's so important, is really taking a look at, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but this is sort of reassessment. Is what you're doing working? You should know after, I'd say 2 weeks to a month, if they're getting better and they're getting stronger and more functional.
Yep.
You're on the right track. If it's getting worse, you got to take a look at yourself and say, okay, is what I'm doing helping or hurting? Is the positioning right?
Yep.
Because even though they may say, yeah, standing feels better, but you put them in extension and that seems to start making them worse. Well, maybe you need to change gears a little bit. I mean, I've told you this story before and I'll reiterate it here. I had a client who came in who, all she said she had, was she said, yep, disc issues. Yeah, I've got disc issues and a little bit of stenosis. That's it. I said, are you sure? Okay. And I asked her for an MRI. Never got it. 3 weeks go by and she's getting worse. Every week she's getting worse and worse and worse. Finally, she brings in the MRI and she has spondylolisthesis, and it's a significant one. So what that told me was, okay, I need to put her in a different position to start with. And once we corrected her starting position and had her a little bit more posteriorly tilted flat back position, suddenly everything started working. It's sort of like the light bulb went on, everything was working. I just had to change gears. I didn't have all the information, and if I didn't ever get that MRI, then it's up to me to say, hey, this may not be working. Let's change gears.
And again, it's really judging where you start on their experience, not what you think is happening, even the diagnosis that you've been given, because that, as you just described, can be very inaccurate. Yep. Clients don't always give you the right information. They don't always know the information. They don't always know, like they heard some word that the doctor said and they repeat it to you, but the doctor may have said in a different context. You really don't know. So it's always looking at that. So how are you doing, right? How are we working on it? So to begin with, again, where are we going to start? Yep. And I have to say, I often start with a couple things. I often start with supine work. So lying them down, getting them in a nice supine position, and just seeing where they can be, where they're comfortable in that position. So maybe I've got a pillow under their knees. Maybe I've got something under their low back. Maybe I've got support for their head, especially if they've got, like Brian has, a very deep rib cage. So if he lies flat without a pillow, his head is falling off, right? So basically pad them up or give them support so that they're relatively neutral. They feel pretty comfortable, whatever that means. And then from there, again, this is why we start at the beginning, because the first step really is awareness. Where is my body? And does this feel better or worse? And then what happens when I move?
Yep.
Right. So the first thing is awareness. Is like for any client with low back pain, they've got to start paying attention to where their low back and their hips are and what movement is doing to them. Is it making them feel better? Or is it making them feel worse? And so supine takes a lot of like the extra energy and information out of it and gives you just a very simple platform to start with.
And I want to go a little deeper on propping their head up. And the reason I'm going to do this is, depending on their neck position, we all know a lot of our clients have postural issues to begin with. So just having them lie down with their head down, a lot of times you're going to see their chin is facing the ceiling, not their eyes. Now, if you do that, and let's say you need to be more in a posterior tilt, well, guess what? As soon as your head goes back, you're arching your back. So you could actually be exacerbating a condition that you don't want to. So by propping their head up, even if they don't necessarily need it, it can actually sometimes assist in getting that rib cage to come down and their back flatter. so that we can get them in the proper position if they need to be more in a posterior tilt. Likewise, if they need to be more extended, sometimes I will give them just a little bit of a head rest, because that can actually help to put them into a little bit more of an extension position. And sometimes that can help. So it may seem like not that big a deal. And when I go to gyms all over, I never see pillows ever.
Right. Or even towels that you can use to fold up.
Towels.
No,
And
I
you
use
don't
them all the time.
all the time. I must have 10, 15 pillows around here of different heights, different, thicknesses and softnesses, and towels and things like that, because I want to make sure that their spine is in as comfortable a position as possible and that they can relax.
Yeah.
I was just in the dentist this past week, and you know the position of the dentist, right? Your head is leaned way back, and it put me into some extension, which my back doesn't really like. But what I found is I was tense the whole time. I was a little bit tense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You weren't comfortable.
No. And to get myself comfortable, I mean, it can mean all the difference in the world. And when you're asking someone to exercise, by getting them into being in a position of comfort relatively, guess what? Their back may be able to calm down a little bit more because they're comfortable, because they're not fighting the position and posture and uncomfortable neck position. So things aren't going to be tense. So I try and get them to relax as much as they can, because that can be a key at the beginning, especially.
You're also trying to create trust with that client. So you're trying to help them know that you can make them feel better. And the other thing too is, if you're trying to work on low back pain, a huge part of any kind of chronic pain, but particularly low back pain, I think is especially this way, you're going to have a hyperactive sympathetic nervous system. That's kind of what pain often does to people. It makes you stressed. It makes you tense. It makes you fight, flight, freeze kind of response. And so if I can get them out of that, if I can get them into a more relaxed, more parasympathetic state where they're kind of just, they can breathe a bit more, that will often decrease their pain all by itself. So creating that comfort and creating that trust is a very important first step for anybody in pain. And particularly a new client who doesn't know you yet and has had maybe not such good experiences with other people, right? And they really need to know this is going to be safe for me. So, that's another reason to do that. One thing I've sometimes done, Brian, particularly like as somebody like with your posture, or somebody who really, really doesn't like extension at all, so I've actually wedged up their whole torso. I have like this kind of foam wedge that Bounce Body sells that goes on the reformer, but it puts them up at an angle. It's soft and squishy. Then I'll often add something more for their head. So the whole spine is supported into a little bit more of a flexed position. And if I'm looking at like the tailbone or the hips, then I'll often either put something under the low back to support their extension position if that's where I want to go, or I'll put just a folded towel underneath the kind of middle or bottom of their sacrum to gently posteriorly tilt them. So those are things that, again, I'm going for maximum comfort in that position, whatever that means.
Comfort means everything here, because you brought up a good point on trust, because I remember once I went into a chiropractor, never met this person before, and they asked me to do something that I was uncomfortable with. And I told him I don't do well in that position. And he said, no, you should be able to, you can do that. I said, no, that usually hurts me. I'd rather not. And he said, no, you have to do it. You have to do it. And guess what? I did it. And I ended up with about a month of pain because of a position he put me in. And did I ever trust him again?
No.
Oh, no. And it's the same thing here. If you can get someone to be comfortable, you use your Cadillac or the reformer to have people lie down on. I've got a mat table, where they can be comfortable. They're not getting up and down off the ground necessarily. It's on a big enough surface. They feel comfortable. They can feel their whole back, not going to fall
off.
And they can really relax. And I'll just have them lay there for a second or 2 or 10 or 30 and talk to them. And you can see they'll start, they're tense a little bit. And then you can see them sort of melting away. And then you can get them to move. And I find that's the moment where things are starting to relax, where you say, how do you feel? I say, fine, good. All right, because I'll put them in the proper position for their body, whatever they makes them feel better. If it's in a posterior tilt or a little bit of extension. But then when they're relaxed, then I'll say, okay, let's try something, and usually it's something very simple.
Yep.
That's not going to bother them because I'm trying to build that trust. I'm also trying to build their confidence that, hey, I can move without additional pain, because that's huge.
Yep. And the other thing there is this, certainly comes to the mind-body approach that Pilates uses a lot is breathing. Because the other thing we know is that breathing can change the muscular tension. And a lot of times, again, if somebody's in pain, there will tend to be some areas that are really gripping, and they're gripping to protect the body, which is good, but that's not usually the only thing that they're doing. They're usually protecting the body and causing trouble at the same time.
Yep.
So, always working on just kind of how do we get them relaxed? How do we get them sort of into their body? And breath is another nice way to do that if they're comfortable with that. And I do say that because sometimes, I've had more than one Pilates session where I've watched a new instructor try to get a client to breathe for a long period of time. And the client is getting totally frustrated. They want to work out. They want to move. They're like, why am I lying here breathing for 20 minutes? So, understanding like some clients will take to that, and some clients are going to be very resistant to that. Just do what you can to get them to relax, but just don't belabor it. Don't push it too far.
Exactly. No. So again, trying to find that position of comfort, trying to find that position where they are relaxed can make all the difference in the world. And I love the fact that you brought up breathing, because in fitness, we rarely cover that enough. We rarely talk about getting someone to fully relax and get their breath to let their body really relax and ease the movement. You don't hear that in a gym environment. You do in Pilates, you do in yoga, you do in other more mind-body, fields. But in fitness, not nearly as much. And I think that's missing. It's more now than it was 5 years ago, but I still think that that's a missing piece sometimes, especially when you're dealing with people in pain.
Yeah, with pain of any kind, it's like if you can find a way to just tone their nervous system down and decrease their anxiety, it always helps, honestly.
Yeah.
So from there, we found them in a position. And, for you at home, like think about your clients, think about yourself or your relatives. This is a really important first step that is often missing, is like, how can I be comfortable? What do I need? And, I have pillows and towels and things going all over the place just to get them into a position which feels supportive and safe and comfortable. Then from there, I typically do something like marching at that point. So both feet on the ground, just lifting one knee up, down, other knee up and down. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, you've got a short lever arc of that hip, right? So there's some hip movement. Hip movement and low back movement are always connected. And what I'm trying to do in this circumstance is disconnect them, is dissociate the hip movement from the back movement. So seeing if they can actually move their legs, move their hips, again, small arc, light work, without changing the position of their low back and their pelvis. And that's also, so that's the exercise piece of it. The awareness piece of them is, what is your pelvis doing and can you control it?
Yep.
Right? Can you make a choice to move it or not move it? Because that's what's really the key thing. And I want to start with that in the very first day, that you are responsible for understanding what your low back and your pelvis are doing, and for helping to figure out which position is most pain-free for you, and then using that. That's step one, groundwork for everything else we're going to do.
What I usually tell clients in that situation is, and this goes back to when you're thinking about doing fitness, when you're thinking about exercising, you think about movement, you're thinking about lifting weights, you're thinking about moving. And so I'll tell them these first few exercises are all about what's not moving, not what is moving. Because I'm trying to create stability in their spine and their core and get things to begin to feel that they're able to hold that dynamic lumbopelvic position. They're able to hold that steady when the rest of their body's in motion. So I'll say, I don't even want you thinking about your legs. I said, look, you can march. How hard is that? And I sort of tease them about it. I say, how hard is that? Come on. Anybody can do that. And they'll go, yeah. I said, but can you do it without moving your back? So that's where I want your focus. I need to put their focus on their back and not lifting their leg. Because let's face it, in fitness, a lot of times your focus goes to whatever's moving. If I'm going to do a
Yeah.
lateral raise with my arm, I'm going to be focusing on a lot of times my hand, how high that's coming up, rather than, okay, what's going on within the shoulder unit itself. And in marching, it's the same thing. You're thinking about the leg. It's like, no, no, no. I want your focus to be on where your spine is. What's that doing? Build their awareness around that. It goes back to that word, awareness. It's all about what's not moving rather than what is. And when I tell them that you can see that it changes, they go, oh, got it. And then I can start to build that awareness of where they are in space.
And that's step one.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's step one. And you can do that by doing marching. I've done that with having them move their arms. I've done that by, lots of different, just even just legs opening and closing, like keeping the feet together and just opening and closing the legs, or opening one leg, opening the other leg, knee drops, or heel slides, where you just take one leg out and bring it back. Right. So all these different ways to just challenge their awareness of where their low back and their pelvis are against the movement of the legs. And can they control it? Can they pull it together?
Yep.
The other thing too that I often do supine is just drawing their attention to their transverse abdominis, to their deep abdominals. And this is not so easy to do in supine, honestly. A lot of people are like, I can't feel anything. I don't have this muscle. It doesn't exist. So a lot of times I'll have them put their fingers just inside the hip bones. So just sort of the side of their abdominals, if you will, and then take a big breath in, big breath out, and then just pull that in. Just that idea of pulling that in and feeling that sink. And you can get more subtle with it, but a lot of times I'm just trying to feel what it feels like to pull that in. And that's the creation of some of the support system for the low back. And again, to do that without tucking the tailbone under or moving in some other way. All I'm doing is just shrinking the waist and making myself a little bit longer.
I don't know if I ever told you this trick that I've used. I call it the tissue box trick. I've got a large tissue box, just, your regular one, and I put it on their stomach. And I tell them, okay, I want you to engage your transverse abdominis. Now look at your tissue box. What always happens? They engage it and the tissue box moves up toward the sky.
Right.
Whoop, it bulges up.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. I said, your abs engaged. However, you just pushed it up. I want you to engage your abs, but I want to see that tissue box drop down a little bit. And you can see they go, huh?
Nice.
And you can see that they're trying to figure it out. And then when they get it, they'll engage and you can see their eyes, the light bulb goes on and they'll see it go down. They say, I got it. And I'll say, now you're actually engaging your transverse abdominis. You're pulling it in. Because I've used a lot of other cues. I mean, I've heard everything from make your lower abs smile to one of my favorites, I got to say, closing the elevator doors, hip bone to hip bone, and the midline is the
drawing
center.
Them together.
Drawing it in, close those elevator doors. And it's like, some people, those work. But some people are visual. And you put the tissue box there and it works.
It's also tactile. It's like you can actually look at it and go, oh, it's going down, or oh, it's going up. And that's really helpful for people. I've also used something like a light weight, like an ankle weight, like a 2 or 3 pound ankle weight, just over the belly. Because then they can push up. Okay, feel like you're pushing up into it. Now feel like you're pulling away from it. Because it also just gives that feedback,
like
that proprioceptive feedback.
Yep.
Yeah, and then it can feel because it can feel it sinking, as they pull in the abdominals.
Yeah. No, those are just different ways to begin to get the transverse abdominis firing in a supine position. Because like you said, it's not the easiest position. Most people brace and they just, and the stomach pushes out.
Yep.
So that's something that, we definitely have to begin to train.
One other way to train that, so staying on that for just a moment, one other way to train that is from all fours, which is another position that I do lot, and I know you do too. A lot of work in all fours because it's a generally very safe place for the low back. It's actually safer and more comfortable for most people than supine, unless there's a wrist issue or a knee issue or something. But if there's not, all fours, most of my clients can hang out in for a while. And they feel like just being there, you have to support that low back some. like just to be in an all fours position without just letting your whole back go into extension and hang forward requires a certain amount of just mild level core control.
Yep.
So, the other one that I do is just one of my teachers always called it pregnant cat abdominals. So when the inhale, the belly goes down, and the exhale, you pull the belly in or pull the belly button in. And most clients can feel that one way better than they can feel the supine.
Yes.
If they really let their belly go, which is another just kind of psychological challenge for most of my clients because they've been taught for years to keep their belly in at all costs.
Yep.
So have them just go in and out with that. And then they can also feel like they're working against gravity a bit, right? They come down and they've got to pull it up and in. And that's another really nice way to work on getting that initial core engagement going.
And almost everybody has had the experience of in that position, sucking it up, pulling that belly off of the ground.
Yes, exactly.
And the trick is not to let the spine move. So that's the other thing. When you've got them in that all fours position, I'll put my hand on their low back and I'll just, whatever position they're in, posterior tilt, extension, whatever we need to do,
just don't
right
move that.
here. And then I'll put my other hand just barely touching their stomach, barely. And I'll say, pull away from my hand. Yeah. And then if they are in that position and their back starts to move, I can tap their low back with the top hand, just tapping it, reminding them, oh yeah, keep that position. And I'll say, now pull away from my bottom hand. Just pull away.
Yep.
And now relax. Now pull away. And once they've gotten it a couple of times, then you can have them do it without having the tactile cues. But sometimes having that tactile cue from me, and I don't have to use my whole hand. I can use fingertips. I can do whatever. But having that tactile cue can make all the difference.
And exactly. And one of the things that, again, so for those of you who wondering why we're caring so much about the transverse abdominis, the whole point here is that transverse abdominis tightens the fascia really around the lumbar vertebra, just to put it very simply, and creates some support around those lumbar vertebra. And so a lot of times that is really where we focus to get that deep layer of support for the low back. The next thing I would do, Brian, I'm going to just take this transverse abdominis into my next step is, and this is, I always do this in every first session, is, okay, now we're going to take that feeling and we're going to go around the room and do some things with that feeling. So I'm going to have them go and open the door, like pull your abdominals in and open the door. Pull your abdominals in and sit down on the bench. Pull your abdominals in and put your shoes on. Like I'll just have them do a few tasks or just sit down and sit up or take a walk around the room and just feel that slight connection. So my goal with that is to immediately take it into where they're going to use this. And then even before they leave, I'll often say, hey, when you open your car door, because a lot of times they're kind of heavy, like when you open your car door, pull that in, open your car door, pull that in, open your refrigerator, pull that in, lift that pot off the stove, whatever the challenges are that, they have in their life. And so I train them like step number one is you're going to just have that little bit of support in everything that you do.
Yeah. And it's important to get them into that function.
Yeah. And to translate supine to working because it doesn't feel, or even all fours to working. It's not the same.
I like to do also transitions. So I'll take them from all fours and I'll say, okay, now if you had to get up from this position, how would you do that? And you can see they go, so I'll teach them, okay, sit back through the hips a little bit and then rise up. But I said, but I want you to feel that pulled in and rise up onto your knees. Because then when you're there, you can bring one knee forward and you can stand up and you can hold on to something. I mean, I can give them assistance, but I got to get them from being, parallel with the ground or horizontal with the ground to being parallel. So I need to get them upright. And guess what? Your glutes are going to work, but that low back is going to have to stabilize. But to support it, you really need that transverse abdominis as well. So you can teach, okay, hold that in. Now sit your hips back. So they're going to get some hip flexion. Now rise up into a high kneel position. And then when you get them there, they're like, oh, and once they feel it and get that engagement, then you can take that into a squat. You can take that into, stand up and sit downs or whatever you want to do, because now they've transitioned and they're like, okay, yeah, I feel that. I can feel the difference. So I find that transition makes a difference too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, we're talking about here is setting the foundation. And that foundation is that awareness of where I am. And then the second step of this is what are my abdominals doing? Because they are really the foundation of support for the low back. So how do we create just that awareness? And one thing that I want to mention here is functionally the transverse abdominis doesn't work at 100%. It works at, like, depending who you talk to, roughly 10 to 30%, something like that.
Yep.
So it's not about like pulling in the abdominals as hard as you possibly can. It's more about just finding the appropriate amount of like gentle squeeze and connection that is going to help them to support their back and to support everything else as they go through life.
And that is so important, to get your clients to realize that they're not doing this all the time, because if you do that squeezing of every single muscle in your abdominals, you're just going to give yourself hemorrhoids and, strain yourself. It's not worth it, guys.
It's not worth it.
But a little bit of engagement goes a long way. And I often will say, okay, I want you to try and engage 100% just for a second. And you'll see them engage. I say, now relax. Now give me 30%.
Yeah.
And they'll do that. And they'll be like, oh, and I say, can you hold this now? So do me a favor. Let's keep talking. Hold that 30%, 20%, mild. And you'll see, yeah, I can hold that. All right. Now let's move your body around. Let's walk. Let's do this 30%. And you can see, yeah, I say, that's where I need you to be. I need you to be at that 30%, not at 100. Because again, 100, we can't maintain.
Right.
I mean, right now at home, try that. Flex your bicep as hard as you can. And let's hold it for the next 3 minutes. Not going to happen. Your muscle will cramp. Your muscle will not be happy with you with the outcome of that. Well, your abdominals are the same way. They're not meant to hold it at that tight contraction for that long a period of time, because guess what happens? The transverse abdominis isn't going to be able to do it. The others are going to try and overwhelm it. Instead of allowing the deepest layer, that transverse abdominis, to just hold it, let's hold it like a little mild hug, just helping you out.
Yep.
And that's really what we're looking for. Exactly.
So we've got comfort, right? Comfort level, awareness, looking at the transverse abdominis. The other thing that I work on with all my low back clients is I work on getting their erector spinae or their multifidi, the deep back muscles. I just kind of have to assess what are the deep back muscles doing, because the transverse abdominis connects somewhat indirectly into the spine through kind of these fascial connections. But there are a lot of muscles right along the spine that are critical for creating balanced support at that deepest level, right where the joints of the spine are.
Yep.
And those are often, in fact, I wouldn't say often, I'd say if I've got a client with a low back problem, they're not firing evenly on both sides, period. Like, that's just not happening. And this may be a long-time postural imbalance that they have. That's very, very common, that just the right side works, the left side doesn't, because they're right side dominant, or they have a rotation that happens to one side, or they've got a hip issue, whatever. Lots of things can do that. So with the multifidi, I've learned a lot of very subtle ways to work with it. And I decided to make this less subtle, because my clients were like, what am I doing?
Subtle doesn't work. Yeah.
No. So for that one, that's where I do like what I call my standing multifidi lean or whatever. Yep, and basically leans. Just from somebody standing up. First thing first is just both feet are on the ground very comfortably. They engage their abdominals. This is another place to play with that little transverse engagement. And then tip forward at the hips. They don't round the back. They flex the hips. Very important. And they do that with their hands on the muscle bands on either side of their spine in the lumbar. Now, particularly kind of around the waist area, but I'll kind of have them feel as much of that as are comfortable. And just notice what is firing. So as soon as they tip forward in a normal, healthy spine, those muscles will fire to keep you from falling forward, right? They'll just, and it's not particularly a concentric contraction, it may just be an isometric contraction, but they'll fire to keep you from falling on your head. Very important. And then you're going to see, like, how much are they doing? Is both sides going? Is just one side going? Is neither side going? Or does one side delayed? Start? Yeah, does one go and then the other one kind of goes, whee, and then it dies, right? So what's happening there? And that's something that just awareness, again, what is happening with those low back muscles?
Yep.
And I'm asking for their feedback on that.
Yep.
Then,
No, and that in and of itself can become an incredible exercise that I love to give people first thing in the morning. It's like,
Yep.
look,
Wake it up.
you've woken up, you brush your teeth, you're standing in front of the, mirror, put your hands on that area in the low back. I call it the gully. You find your spinous process and go right off it. You got a little gully before you get to the big muscles, and just lean forward and get them to fire and do it 10 times. Just wake them up. And what you're going to find is the more you do it, the more they're going to start firing and get a little bit more active, and something to think about. You may have that delay. One side fires before the other. And the reason for that is these are segmentally innervated, is that the muscles right there are innervated by the nerve that comes out right there. So if there's dysfunction at one level, where you have a nerve issue at one level, well, guess what? That level, it might have some delayed firing. It's not firing as quickly as it should, because these are reactionary muscles. They should fire quick, fast.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if they're not, a lot of times it's because you've had some dysfunction and those muscles now are firing slower. They're joining the party late, and we want them to go a little bit faster. So by doing the exercise, you can actually wake it up and begin to get it firing a little quicker. And sometimes adjusting your foot position can do that too. One foot slightly forward, one foot slightly back. And if you find the position where they're firing at the same time, great. Do that 10 times. Is usually what I'll give my clients. And over time, you're going to find those muscles begin to fire faster and at the same time. And so that's a great exercise that I love to give.
Yeah. So when you've got an imbalance between the two, a very simple way sometimes works for most people to get the lazy side or the sleepy side to fire is you step 1 foot, like you just got kind of a light lunge. So one leg is forward, typically that knee's bent, back leg's relatively straight. And lots of ways to do this. You can either just take that staggered stance with the less active leg behind you. Right. So 1 foot forward, 1 foot back. And basically the lazy side should be behind you, because you're trying to create a little bit of an extension moment in the spine there. And then from there, you are going to tip forward. I do this different ways, either just tipping forward from that staggered stance or gently shifting your weight towards that front foot and then back. So one or the other will typically work for a client, and they'll feel like, oh, I can get that side to fire now. And to Brian's point, like, they don't need to do a lot of this. This is neuromuscular re-education, I think. Or that's how I think about it. It's just the brain going, oh yeah, it reminds me I got to do that thing. Like it's part of the to-do list that the brain has forgotten about temporarily. And I also, like Brian, both of us are very big on helping clients to find a way to do this in their life. So for me, it's like, you do it when you're either waiting for your coffee in the morning, which most people have some moment when they're waiting for their coffee in the morning, or when they're brushing their teeth, or like find a time that it works into their schedule to just make it a habit. Like, okay, I'm going to wake this up at this moment in my morning routine.
Yep. And you'll be surprised that they'll continue to do it for a long period of time because it becomes a routine. And that's wonderful, because they have made it part of their daily thing. Let's wake these muscles up. Cool. All right. I'm good to go. And a lot of times they will be, because those muscles are firing, they are stabilizing, they're holding things together, because that's what the multifidi really wants to do. It wants to help stabilize the spine at the closest level. We have these big muscles around it that help it to move. Well, these help it to stay healthy. It's sort of, they guide a healthy motion of that area of the low back. So they hold it together.
Yeah. And for many clients too, this becomes a way to decrease pain. I've had a lot of clients where it just takes some of that stress or that tension, achiness or something out of their back. And so then I have clients, like, they'll do it waiting in line at the grocery store, or they'll if their back's like, let's say they've been wandering around all day or shopping all day or something. It's Christmas season, so that'll happen. And their back just gets really sore. They'll just take a moment and kind of do a little bit of that, because it doesn't look that funny. I mean, you can do this in public and nobody's going to look at you too askance. And just, it allows them a little bit of relief, and they can find that they can get that going. So it's that transverse abdominis and our multifidi. And those two things, again, if you can get those balances going, if you can, that will create, again, a foundation we're going to build on. But those two things, where's my pelvis, or those three things: awareness, where's my pelvis, how do I hold it together? transverse abdominis firing, and multifidi firing in balance as best as possible.
Yep.
Those three things, like then you just take those and you build on them for the rest of time. Yep. You challenge them in more difficult situations, you add resistance to them, you add all kinds of things, but that's kind of, setting that foundation of those key pieces.
And if you see what we're looking at here, we're creating the awareness, but we're also starting to create some stability. We talked about this before. The body likes to be stable. Joints want to be stable because a stable joint is often going to be a much healthier joint than one that's unstable. Absolutely. So we're reminding the spine how to regain that stability. We don't want it locked down. We want it to be able to move, and we're challenging some movement. That's why we get them into functional positions. We want them to move, but we're also teaching it how to be stable with motion, which comes into that dynamic lumbopelvic positioning. Put you in the right position, teach you how to stabilize, remind the muscles, here's what you do, here's your job. You only do this. That's what your job is. And now let's get you to move. Let's get you to do something and make sure that those muscles are assisting you in staying stable within the spine. I find too many people try and jump into mobility aspects and want to do incredible amounts of stretching too soon. That's good. It's good to do down the road, but you've got to be stable first. You've got to be able to move properly first before you ask them to do something that's going to really challenge that mobility or that range of motion. Because sometimes, I mean, anybody who's had low back pain and had spasms, what causes it to spasm is usually moving too far.
Right. And going in an unstable space, and the body goes, I got to protect you.
And it locks down.
One other thing too, that just to take the opposite side of that, the other thing is the reason we start at this micro level close to the joints is because if I also, either with mobility or with strength, go right on to doing, let's say, a suspension trainer exercise, right? Or plank work, or something that's more whole bodied. If you don't build a balance at the foundation, the body will not ever get that balance. I know that sounds a little harsh, but it's actually true. So in other words, if I haven't built that balance into the body and I put them into a challenging situation, whatever, they're going to do that however they can.
Yep.
And the however they can may be exactly what's causing their back pain in the first place. Right? That they go into whatever imbalance they've got to hold them together. Like, I'm in a plank, I've got to pull whatever, right?
Precisely.
So it's kind of like, you got to build up the foundation as balanced as you can, and then add layers to it while maintaining that balance and that organization.
How many times have we had a client who has compensation patterns that they cannot get rid of because that's the way they learned to do something, and they learned it 20. I mean, I still fight with clients, and forgive the word fight, but I'm still working with clients who every time they do a crunch, they flatten their back, they tuck their tailbone, or every time they do a squat, they stand up and they tuck their tailbone under and squeeze their butt as hard as they can. I'm like, this isn't an aerobics class from 1982. I'm not Jane Fonda here. I'm not trying to teach you how to do that. I just want you to stand up. But you see those patterns become ingrained. And when we have those compensatory patterns, they also become ingrained. So you see someone doing it. I was working with someone literally today on a plank with a BOSU, and I got them in position. I could see their entire body was starting to hunch over. They were starting to grip a little too hard. They were in a push-up position with the BOSU upside down. So they were in a little wobbly position.
And hands on the BOSU.
Hands on the BOSU. Yeah. And you could see that they were gripping a little too tight, and their shoulders were hunched, and they were rounding their back. And I took probably 3 to 4 minutes to put them in the proper position, getting their lats engaged, getting their shoulders out of their ears, getting them into neutral shoulders, and getting everything else to be calm. And they actually, the word he used was, I feel locked in. I feel, I don't know what you did, but this is easier, but more challenging. Same time, I could stay here and I feel like I'm using the muscles correctly. And I was like, exactly. But we had to erase all of those compensatory issues. So when you jump into doing exercises too soon or beyond their capabilities without teaching them foundation work, which is really what we're talking about here, is building our foundation, you're going to create some of those patterns sometimes that can really hinder rather than help down the road.
Yep. Again, I mean, you do too, but I've worked with a ton of very high level athletes, and the hardest thing, I'm thinking of a couple of dancers, and I'm thinking of a Olympic ice skater that I worked with. The hardest thing was actually kind of detraining a very imbalanced pattern that they'd gotten into to basically survive. Right?
Yep.
It's like, for them, one of them, the ice skaters often tend to move in one direction around the rink. So they get very one-sided in terms of how they rotate and how their pelvis moves to kind of move in that circle.
Yep.
And it was interesting because like their pelvis was in a funny position. One leg was more turned out than the other. Their torso had a twist in it. And they were at the end of their career. So they were starting to look at like a lot of back pain from all those imbalances over the many years, which they had to do, or at least that's how their body had figured out how to do what they needed to do for their activity. Sure. And detraining that or retraining that is just it's a slow, gentle process of kind of like, okay, let's try to build the foundation and then kind of get to the level you want to get to slowly and carefully, right? While keeping that foundation in mind.
Yeah. So, and I actually call this foundation work. I tell every single person, I say, look, we're going to start here on the table. And the first few exercises, it's all about what's not moving, not what is. So that they start getting that. And these are all things I give them for homework. And they often ask, well, when can we start doing real exercises? And I say, look, we have to build a foundation. If you're building a house, you don't build on a solid foundation, it's going to crumble. You don't build a house on sand. I said, so we're trying to build you the most solid foundation possible. I say, trust me, we're going to get you off this table eventually. We're going to get you into doing exercises you can't even imagine yourself doing today. We're going to get you there. It may take a week. It may take a month. It may take a year. I can't promise anything. It's going to take some time. But we're going to get you there. And I remember one client was complaining the first 2 weeks, when am I getting off this dang table? 6 weeks later, I have her doing unbelievable exercise. She said, can't we just lay down on the table already? Can't we go back to those? It's like, see, told you. And it's because we built up that foundation.
Yeah.
And that's really what your first few sessions or first few weeks are all about, creating that awareness, letting them know where their body is in space, letting them feel where their body is in space, strengthening that, giving them homework, strengthening that, and then turning that into functional activity so they can be aware when they're doing other things and building onto it. So the foundation is really where it has to start.
Absolutely. So, this is Brian and I. We tend to deep dive for those of you who haven't spent much time with us. So far we've gone through like 5 exercises. But again, that's just to reiterate, that's the foundation we need to build.
Yeah.
Going on to like next steps. So oftentimes, particularly in the Pilates environment, so I'm going to talk from that lens at the moment, there's a lot of emphasis on spinal flexion, right? That's kind of the foundation of many of the exercises that we do, or spinal extension. So I don't always start with side bending or rotation, but if I'm going to start with something like an abdominal curl, just activating those abdominals a little more than with just that transverse abdominis moment. That's where I'm going to start to find out what position do they need to be in to get more load through the system. This is both true for bridging and for curls. So I'm going to use bridging and curls, right? Bridging more for the back body, curls more for the front body. And so that's like, okay, so let's just try a curl. And a lot of times it's just like, what happens to their low back when they do that? Does their low back squish down onto the mat so the whole spine flexes? And then when they come back to neutral, does it pop up into extension? That's kind of normal. And some of that may be the pattern you want. If you've got a client who you are discovering does better with flexion, I'm going to keep them flexed through the whole movement, whatever that means, right? Maybe I've got to passively tip their tail, or I've got to put pillow under their head. So they're just taking maybe a small range, but they're really not moving their back much. They're really going through kind of more thoracic flexion and then back to kind of neutral. Or if I know somebody needs to keep that low back in a slight extension, Maybe I've got a towel under there. I've got some supported neutral going. So that position is staying. And then again, they're just going to take that curl up without changing the pressure on that towel. So this is also taking that next step of finding that stability for whatever position is most comfortable for them. And it's the position that we're going to keep training them towards as we move forward.
Yep. Yep. No, those are important things. And I'll often do that. I will have them do curls occasionally. I'm not a huge curl fan as much as, it's done in Pilates. I prefer pelvic tilts to begin to work that a little bit, just because if done properly, you can really do a lot with the anterior body. You can do a lot with the abdominals to get you into that pelvic tilt, as long as you sort of get the butt out of the way. So they're not trying to squeeze their way into it or push with their legs. And it just requires a little bit more work and a little bit more awareness on their part. But yeah, I love doing that to try and get them into trying to figure out what's going to work for them and their lumbar spine. And now some people, it's totally contraindicated. I'm not going to get them into a pelvic tilt. And you know what? That's fine. That's okay. For their body, that's okay. And for them, I may want to focus a little bit more on the spinal flexion to come from more of the thoracic rather than, the lumbar spine. So everybody is individual in that sense, And
I mean, the second thing there is looking at a bridge, right? Which often starts with a pelvic curl and then moves on from there, right? And then goes up. So that's also a place where I can get a fairly quick assessment there. If somebody does a very round back articulated bridge, so, curling the tail and then rolling one vertebra at a time up, like we often cue it, and they get discomfort or pain with that, that often suggests to me that they're two things. One, they might prefer a more extended or neutral position, but also oftentimes for me, it suggests that they're somewhat unstable in their spine. Because when you take that curl and you roll up, if I then take my hands and feel the erector spinae we just talked about with the multifidi, they're squishy. There's not that muscular support through particularly the muscles along this, like the glutes may be working, but the erector spinae are not. So the spinal muscles are not generally working in a round back bridge.
Right.
So that's like, okay, so that tells me that they need more work on that area. So then I might say, okay, we're going to do a flat back bridge, and you're basically going to press your hips up toward the ceiling, without that articulation, and they'll get a lot more activation through that back body. So if that's helpful, for example, if I've got somebody who's unstable there or has got a disc issue, that may be the right way to do a bridge.
Right.
If I've got somebody who's got more stenosis or something where they really need that flexion, the round back bridge and not too high may be the ways to go. So those are also just ways to play with understanding what's a comfortable position for them and where you need to work.
Yeah, completely agree. When I get people from physical therapy, I'll often see them do more of the flat back bridge, but I also will see them go up too high.
Yeah, and then they end up in extension.
And they end up into a lot of extension, and depending on their back position, that may be helpful. But what I find is that their lumbar spine begins to take over, and their glutes begin to shut down a little bit the higher up they go. So you just have to moderate that when you're working with the clients, and don't allow them to go too high. I say, look, if you're just on your neck and your shoulders are coming off the mat, you've gone too far.
Exactly.
I try and say you want, for most women, I'll say a little above your bra strap where you're going up is fine. You don't want to come up a whole lot more than that, because then you're going to find yourself going into too much extension, unless that's what we want them to do. So just something to be aware of. Yeah. We did a lot today. We covered a lot, and I feel like we just scratched the surface. I think this is going to require a part 2.
This is going to be a part 2 or 3 for sure. Yeah. So guys, I hope you like, this is why we do this. This is kind of the deep dives that Brian and I do, because you can give somebody the 5 exercises that are going to solve your back pain. Yeah, kind of. But the key parts of that is they've got to have awareness. They've got to be committed to it. They've got to understand it. They've got to work on developing that foundation through those simple exercises that then you can expand from. Without that foundation, you're just reinforcing whatever movement pattern they're already doing, which may not be working for them. And that may be why they have back pain.
Yeah, very much so. Well, good.
Yeah.
So next week, we'll cover a little bit more on the exercises. We're going to do a little bit more about strategizing, because it's not just about the first week or two that you're seeing them. This is about long term. So again, progressions. So next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about some other exercises and some exercise strategies to start thinking about when you're working with these clients. As always, you can reach out to us at movingconvos@gmail.com. Check out our Instagram, Moving Convos. We've got a lot of videos on there, a lot of fun stuff that Nora and I have filmed over, the last year and a half or so. We've had a lot of fun with that. And do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. And if you want to take a gander at my book, check it out on Amazon, Back Exercise, Stabilize, Mobilize, and Reduce Pain. And so for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We will see y'all next week.
Thanks, guys.